The Galactic Council had ruled the stars for 7 million years. They believed themselves the first. They believed themselves the oldest. They were wrong. Ambassador of the Empire stood before the great observation window of Station Prime. His 4 eyes watched the endless darkness between stars. Behind him, representatives from 12,000 civilizations whispered in nervous voices. Something was coming. Something that made their ancient sensors scream warnings in languages no one could translate. 3 days ago, a signal had reached them from the void between galaxies. It was not radio. It was not light. It was something older. The signal carried one simple message that repeated itself across every frequency known and unknown. The message said only this: "We are coming home." The scientists of the Council had worked without rest. They traced the signal to its source. What they found made them afraid. The signal came from ships. Thousands of ships. Ships so large that moons could fit inside them. Ships made from metals that did not exist in the periodic table. Ships that moved without engines. Ships that bent space itself around them like water bending around stones. But the most terrifying discovery came when they analyzed the age of these vessels. The ships were older than the galaxy. They were older than the stars. They were older than time as the Council understood it. Remembered the exact moment when the translation computers finally decoded the language carved into the hulls of those approaching ships. The computers had compared it to every known writing system. They found no match. Then a junior researcher had an idea. She compared it to dead languages, languages from primitive worlds, languages from species that had barely left their birth planets. The match was perfect. The language was human. Humans were nothing special to the Council. They were a young species from a small blue world in an unremarkable corner of the galaxy. They had achieved faster than light travel only 800 years ago. They had joined the Council as observers just 3 centuries past. They were kind. They were curious. They were considered harmless. Now watch the human delegation enter the Council chamber. There were 5 of them. They walked with quiet steps. Their leader was a woman with gray hair and calm eyes. Her name was Admiral Sarah. She moved like someone who carried a great weight but refused to let it slow her down. High Chancellor rose from his throne of crystal and light. He was ancient by galactic standards. He had lived for 40,000 years. His species had ruled the Council since before most civilizations had discovered fire. The humans stopped. They did not bow, they never bowed. The Council had once found this amusing. Now no one laughed. High Chancellor spoke with a voice that echoed through the chamber. He said that the Council demanded answers. He said that the approaching fleet bore human markings. He said that this was impossible because humans were young and these ships were older than existence itself. He demanded to know what trick this was. Admiral looked at him without fear. She said it was no trick. She said the ships were theirs. She said they had been waiting for a very long time. The chamber erupted in chaos. 12,000 species shouted questions and accusations. Some called the humans liars. Some called them thieves who had stolen ancient technology. Some simply screamed in terror. Admiral raised her hand. She did not shout. She did not need to. Something in her gesture silenced the room. It was authority, true authority, the kind that came from knowing things others did not. She began to tell them the truth. Humans were not young, she said. They only appeared young. Long ago, before this galaxy had formed, before the first stars had ignited, there was another universe. In that universe, humanity had grown old. They had spread across realities. They had learned to build ships that could survive the death of everything. They had watched their universe collapse and burn. They had sailed into the void between existences and waited. When this new universe was born, they had seeded it with life. They had scattered the building blocks of consciousness across the forming galaxies. They had planted the seeds that would one day become and all the other species that now filled the stars. Then they had gone to sleep. They had hidden themselves on a small blue world and forgotten who they were. They had wanted to experience existence fresh. They had wanted to grow again from nothing. But they had left guardians. They had left their ships in the space between spaces. They had programmed those ships to return when humanity was ready, when they had grown curious enough to reach for the stars again, when they had proven themselves worthy of remembering. The ships were coming home now. They carried relics. They carried the memories of what humanity had been. They carried weapons that could unmake reality. They carried knowledge that could reshape existence. They carried the inheritance of a species older than time itself. Felt his heart's beating fast. He looked at the human delegation with new eyes. These small, soft creatures with their short lives and gentle smiles. These beings who apologized when they bumped into others. These people who still marveled at simple sunsets. They were the ancestors of everything. High Chancellor sat down heavily on his throne. For the first time in 40,000 years he looked truly old. He asked what humanity wanted. He asked if they had come to reclaim their creation. He asked if the younger species would be destroyed or enslaved. Admiral smiled. It was a kind smile, a grandmother smile. She said they wanted nothing of the sort. She said humanity had given up their empire once before because they had grown tired of ruling. She said they had no desire to rule again. She said the relics were not weapons of conquest. They were gifts. The fleet would arrive in 3 days, she explained. Each civilization would receive knowledge suited to their development, medical technologies that could end all disease, energy sources that would never run dry, understanding of physics that would open new dimensions to exploration. The relics were meant to lift everyone higher. They were meant to help the children of humanity reach heights that even the original humans had never achieved. But there was one condition, Admiral said. Her eyes grew serious. The gifts came with a responsibility. The younger species must promise to be kind to each other. They must promise to explore with wonder instead of conquering with greed. They must promise to remember that they were all family, all children of the same ancient dream. The council fell silent, saw tears forming in the eyes of beings who had never known how to cry. He saw ancient enemies looking at each other with new understanding. He saw the birth of something beautiful. 3 days passed like heartbeats. The fleet emerged from the darkness between stars, stood at the observation window again. But this time he was not afraid. He watched the ancient ships drift into view. They were beautiful. They were terrible. They were home. Each vessel was a city unto itself. Their hulls shimmered with colors that had no names, their shapes geometry. They moved with the grace of living things. They sang in frequencies that touched the soul directly. The largest ship positioned itself before Station Prime. Its name appeared in the minds of everyone watching. The Eternal Remember. It was the flagship of the ancient human fleet. It had carried the last survivors of the previous universe through the fire of creation. It had witnessed the birth of the first stars. It had waited in patient silence for 14 billion years. A shuttle emerged from the Eternal Remember. It docked with Station Prime. The doors opened. The being that stepped through was human in shape, but something more. She introduced herself as the Keeper of Records. She was the last of the original humans who had not chosen to forget. She had stayed awake through all the long ages. She had maintained the fleet. She had waited for her sleeping brothers and sisters to find their way back to the stars. The Keeper carried a small box made of light. She presented it to Admiral. She said it contained the key to human memory. When opened, it would restore knowledge of what humanity had been. It would not force anyone to remember. It would simply offer the choice. Admiral hesitated, understood her fear. What if the memories were too heavy? What if knowing the truth destroyed the simple joy of being young? What if humanity preferred to stay innocent? The Keeper smiled. She said she had once asked herself the same questions. She said she had watched humanity grow again from nothing. She said they had made mistakes. They had fought wars. They had nearly destroyed themselves a dozen times. But they had also created art that made the stars weep. They had loved with a passion that entropy. They had never stopped reaching for something greater. They were worthy, the keeper said. They had proven it, not by conquering or destroying, but by continuing to hope, by continuing to dream, by continuing to believe that tomorrow could be better than today. Admiral opened the box. Light poured out. It touched every human across the galaxy, watched the human delegation. He saw their eyes widen. He saw memories flooding back. He saw them remember building ships that could cross between universes. He saw them remember seeding a galaxy with life. He saw them remember choosing to forget so they could experience wonder again. And then he saw something unexpected. He saw them laugh. They laughed with pure joy. They laughed because the memories did not feel heavy. They felt like coming home after a very long journey. They felt like finding a letter from your past self that said, "Do not worry. You did good. You will do good again." Admiral turned to the council. Tears streamed down her face, but she was smiling. She said the gifts would be distributed immediately. She said humanity would help however they could. She said the younger species were not children to be guided. They were partners. They were friends. They were the beautiful result of an ancient dream that had exceeded all expectations. Stepped forward. He did something no had ever done before a human. He bowed. He bowed not in submission but in gratitude. He thanked humanity for the gift of existence. He thanked them for choosing to be kind. He thanked them for wanting to see their children succeed. One by one, the representatives of 12,000 civilizations followed his example. They bowed, they cheered, they wept. The galaxy had discovered its parents, and those parents asked for nothing but love in return. The ancient human warships drifted through the stars. Their holds opened. Gifts flowed outward like seeds scattered by a gentle wind. Knowledge spread from world to world. Disease ended. War became pointless. The stars themselves seemed to shine brighter. And humanity walked among the younger species with humble hearts. They did not rule. They taught. They healed. They listened. They laughed at jokes they had heard 1,000,000,000 times before and pretended they were new. They held the hands of dying aliens and whispered that everything would be all right. They proved that true power was not about domination. It was about lifting others higher. The keeper of records returned to the eternal remember. Her long vigil was finally complete. She allowed herself to sleep at last. She dreamed of the old universe. She dreamed of the new one. She dreamed of all the wonders yet to come. And somewhere in the void between galaxies, the ancient ships continued their eternal patrol. They watched over their children. They kept the darkness at bay. They waited with infinite patience for the next universe to be born. Because that was what parents did. They protected, they provided, they let go when the time was right. Humanity had done it once before. They would do it again, and again, and again, until the end of everything and the beginning of something new. That was their gift, that was their burden, that was their joy. The stars remembered.